Brilliant managers never have the answers. What they have is great questions instead. You have to let go of your ego, and you have to understand that you have to be successful through others. The success of a good manager was how well their store performed when they're on holiday. If everyone is dependent on you, you are absolutely a bottleneck to success. If you're going to your team and you don't know the answers, that's a celebration. We should be collaborating as a team to solve this problem together. We become the fixer, the solver, the solution giver. Every time someone comes with a problem, it's on your shoulders. Your to-do list gets longer and longer and longer every day. When you make that behavioral shift from telling people what to do to having an inquiry-led control of leadership where you're asking questions to help others solve problems, you get about 20% of your time back. The better quality conversations, the stakeholder management, the client relationships, actually having less stressed time to have proper conversations to develop your team. That's when the magic happens.
Thank you for coming on our podcast. Could you talk about what problem you kept seeing in organizations that made you say, this is not a training issue, this is a management operating system issue?
I think what was happening is early on when we were working in large corporates, we were seeing lots of organizations really get excited about the concept of coaching. And they were asking for coaching skills training for their managers. They loved the idea of coaching. It was just being understood in organizations. They were really, really keen to get their managers to be coaches. And the reality was, when you looked around what the training was out there at the time, lots of training organizers went, yes, of course we can do that. We can train your managers to be coaches. And everyone developed something called a manager as coach training program. And so some organizations that were putting thousands of people through these managers coach training program, and everyone loved it. Everyone came back, that was amazing. That was great. That was great. But there was no embedded change in the manager's behavior in the organizations. And it just became a box ticking exercise. They'd put people through a workshop. Yay. But there was no change. The managers were still telling people what to do, not coaching. There was no change in productivity, no change in ROI, no change in any impact. And we were, I guess, ultimately brought in by some of our client organizations to sort of say, what is actually going on here? Why is this not making a difference? Everyone says the training's great. And what we quickly understood is that managers simply don't have time to be coaches. They are extremely busy. They're under pressure. And the best example was when we were working with the UK's Royal Mail, where they would be fined if they didn't get 99% of their mail out every day. So their job as a manager is to get the mail out. So this concept of these coaching sessions just didn't fit in with their busy day jobs. And so really what drove us, that was kind of the issues. So how do you, knowing that coaching is a great thing, how do you not make it about doing coaching stuff and doing these intermittent sit-down sessions, but how do you bring the concept of coaching into the flow of every conversation, into the flow of work, just so that it's part of who we are? And that was really the remit, and realizing that everything out there, the whole market is based on having a coach serve a coachee, and you're on the coachee's agenda. That's what you're taught as a coach. But as a manager, no one was realizing the manager's on their own agenda. The manager has to deliver the outcome for their department. So they're not on the coachee's agenda. They have their own agenda that's equally important. And therefore, we decided to focus on the manager and how we can support the manager to change their behavior for the benefit of both themselves and the coachee. But it's about the manager, not about the coaching. And that's kind of how we changed it.
You've talked about coaching being taught as a transactional skill confined to sessions. What was the cost of that framing in the real workplace, as you mentioned?
Well, it's huge. It's about the impact. It's the cost of delivering training that isn't utilized outside of one-to-ones. The bigger cost of having managers that don't coach as part of their natural style is a drop in productivity, a drop in retention. It's the cost of the overall performance of an organization. So it's really hard to measure all of those things and put it down to accidental managers. But the reality is that 82% of our global population of leaders and managers in the workforce right now are accidental managers. They are people that have been promoted into people leader roles where they've now got a team to look after because they were really, really good at their job. at their technical job where they brought expertise, but they didn't necessarily want to become great people leaders. And then when they become managers, they're often not given the tools or the skills to be great people leaders. And that's where the cost is. And as a result of that, we have higher sickness, we have absence. I think it's now been proven that there's a 16% drop in productivity for having accidental managers in your workforce. So
Mm.
there's massive impact.
When you two, you and Dominic, that is, started collaborating, what was the first behavior you both agreed mattered more than any toolkit?
Well, our background is quite commercial. So we both come from really commercial backgrounds. Dominic had come to the concept of coaching through change management. He'd been a consultant in the big four consultancies. He'd run major projects of multi-100 million-pound projects. He had seen the only way to get change really implemented at scale was the power of questions and the way you communicate and engaged within change programs. I'd come from a retail background, which is all about commercial, all about the bottom line. And so I really needed to do anything I was going to do, had to have value for an organization as well as the individual. So we
Mhm.
have this very commercial angle on coaching that meant that for us, anything we did had to be measurable and had to be evidence-based. So it couldn't just be a nice experience, a nice conversation, happy sheets, people feeling that they enjoyed something. The so what, what's in it for us? How are we going to measure success? How are we going to evidence that? And that's always sat through all of everything. Even our exec coaching programs actually have ROI attached to them. But certainly when we're looking at management capability, that has to have a measurable outcome for an organization.
That was something that surprised me in my own research was how little measurement was actually being done. Um, why do you think so much um, resources were being devoted to something such as leading people without clarity on what the outcome was in terms of measurement?
I think the truth is most organizations don't really know how to measure, and most training isn't built to capture measurements. So if you don't know your starting point, it's very hard retrospectively to go back and allocate the success of any program that you've designed or delivered.
Mhm.
And people don't necessarily think about that at the start of their journey. I
Mhm.
think for us, you have to, and I remember doing gosh talks probably 20 years ago, around how you have to set a program up for success. If you want to measure the ROI, it's absolutely possible, but it's only possible if you start off designing with the capture through that. Because if you don't know what you're going to measure and you don't have a beginning or end, then you can't achieve that. So it's a mindset as much as it is the mechanics.
Mhm. If operational coaching is an attitude of mind, what is the before and after mindset for the manager? Sorry.
Yeah. So look, let's just start with saying we're on the side of the manager in everything that we do as an organization. And if you think about what managers are facing right now, it is an impossible task. They are having to do more and more work. They're working in flatter structures. So they're overworked, they're often stressed, they're often overwhelmed. They have post COVID had to manage hybrid working, workforces that have got a change in values in terms of how much their balance of work and life balance is. They're now expected to be experts in well-being and support the well-being of their teams. They are struggling often to handle challenging conversations. They've got 5 generations to work through in terms of the workforce, all with different needs, really, in terms of how people come to work and why they come to work and what they want from their boss. I mean, the task is endless, and they've got also to deliver results for their organization. So if you've got that context, if that's the environment we're working in, it becomes really, really challenging for a leader and manager to do anything but just get through the day. So what we tend to do when we're busy managers is that we tend to want to help people because we still want to look after our team and be good people. So when people come to us with problems, our gut response is to solve the problems. We
Mhm.
become the fixer, the solver, the
Mm.
solution giver. We're the expert. We've done it before. We know the solution. Here's how I would do it. Go and try this. Go and do that. And that is our default behavior. Now, the problem with that default behavior is it's kind of like you're in a status. You every time someone comes with a problem, it's on your shoulders. You've got another thing to do. Your to-do list gets longer and longer and longer every
Mm.
day. And how many of your listeners start off the week with a plan of what they're going to do? And at the end of the week, they've crossed off all of this stuff that wasn't on their list at the beginning of the week, but they've done none of the stuff that really mattered. Has that, have you ever had a week like
My
that?
to-do list is only getting longer.
Exactly. Because we're doing too much. We're in this do state the whole time. So the whole point of operational coaching is to shift us from believing our job as managers is to do the doing to instead learn to ask questions to help others solve problems for themselves. When you make that shift, that behavioral shift from telling people what to do and having that more command and control style of leadership to having an inquiry led control of leadership where you're asking questions to help others solve problems, you
Mhm.
get about 20% of your time back. You get a day a week back to do that higher value work, to start getting through that to do list that you really want, the higher value strategic thinking, the better quality conversations, the stakeholder management, the client relationships, and actually having less stressed time to have proper conversations to develop your team. That's when the magic happens.
That sounds very attractive, but in the real world, and even using myself as an example, I find it difficult to let go of the control, even with the conscious awareness that I am then becoming the bottleneck if my people aren't empowered to do more than I can do. What do you think is that status? Like what is what's the fear there, or what's the hurdle there into adopting that mindset, do you think?
It's a philosophy about what your role is as a manager. If you reframed what your job was, then you would lose that fear very, very quickly. And if you think about where we are now in a world of AI,
Mhm,
knowledge is going to become a commodity because most people can now acquire that knowledge through asking great prompts. What isn't going to be available through AI is the quality and the power of how you can motivate and engage and have others around you deliver high performing outputs and driving
mm,
productivity.
mm,
So, actually, however you feel your role of a manager is now, if you don't start reframing that role and start understanding your purpose is to really develop and unleash others' potential rather than
mm,
it to be all about you,
mhm,
then you are going to be made redundant fairly quickly in the current shifts we're seeing.
mhm. What is a coachable moment in the wild? Can you give one or two examples that are not performance reviews or one to ones?
Absolutely. So one of the things we do on the program is really help people identify what is a coachable moment. And the reality is most opportunities in terms of your day-to-day interactions and conversations become coachable moments once you learn how to identify them. So what isn't a coachable moment is like an emergency situation. So if you're working in a hospital and there's an, in the A&E, or you're working for the fire service, or there's a flood, you're going to probably have to be quite, an advocate in terms of telling people what to do to help solve a problem quickly and make some quick decisions. But even in those extreme situations, which you say are not a coachable moment, you can still have a retro coachable moment because you can, after you've solved that major problem, you can ask questions around what can we learn from that? What might you do differently next time? If I hadn't been here, what would you have done instead? So
Mhm,
there are ways of even turning non-coachable moments into coachable moments. But in reality, most times a person comes to you with an issue or a problem, that's almost certainly going to be a coachable moment. So that's kind of the one of the most easiest ones to spot because someone's coming to you for advice or for help. A gut reaction in that moment is to help because we want to help them. And therefore, we'll hear what they say and then we'll do one of two things. We either tell them what we think they could do and send them away to try that, or we might ask some questions, but we're probably going to be asking questions to
mhm,
get data, to fact find, so that we
mhm,
can have more information to give them a better answer about what we think they should do and give them a solution. So
mhm,
the concept of coachable moments is in that moment when someone comes to you with a problem, is you learn to stop what you're about to say, stop fixing the problem, stop telling them what to do, and
mhm,
bite your tongue and think instead. Can I ask a question here? Is this a coachable moment? Is there an opportunity to help them have an insight instead? And then you flip that and you ask a question, not for your benefit, but for the benefit of the other person, for the benefit of them to have an insight, for them to start thinking about what they could do to solve that problem. They might already have some great ideas. Often they're just looking for validation or they're looking for approval that they can do that, looking
mhm,
for permission. It's
mhm.
it's not that they haven't got ideas, but if you don't stop and ask those questions, you're just going to take on the work yourself.
Yeah, yeah. I was thinking about as you were sharing that answer, this example of firefighters, and you might have the chief or whoever is in charge, and people are coming to ask questions. What should I do? And it's like, well, there's a teachable moment. I could tell you what to do, or I could empower you. And I think in those moments, it sounds kind of perhaps silly, like just the fastest route to solving the problem. But I wonder to what extent we each see a fire, and it seems like everything has that emergency, must be solved quickly, move on to the next fire mentality, and creating that space, that gap, so that you can have a coachable moment, and empower your team, to that's a virtuous cycle that creates this compounding effect of more problem solving and better decisions. I'd like to pivot into purposeful inquiry, and not asking nice questions. So maybe to begin with, what makes an inquiry purposeful rather than polite? And I'm thinking about like assessments.
So the point of a purposeful inquiry or asking a powerful question is the difference between asking a question for your own benefit or for the other person's benefit. So we often ask questions, but what is the purpose behind the questions? Why are we asking those questions? What are we trying to achieve by that question? And most of the time, we're asking questions for us, for ourselves. So the point of purposeful inquiry is not to ask questions for ourselves, but just to ask questions for the benefit of the other person. And that's where the magic really happens. If you can make that shift, if you can learn to switch the reason you're asking the question, then all of the things you talked about firefighting, about what your role is, about how you spend your time shifts very quickly. I'm taking my quickly. Within months, within 4 weeks, you'll be seeing a difference in what capacity you've got. Within 2, 3 months, it'll be radical. Within 6 months, it'll be transformational.
Amazing. In your research, have you come across like 3 common manager questions that sound helpful but actually steal accountability?
Yeah. So I guess some examples that you might have is, and we've all done this, right? Someone comes to you with their problem and you think, oh, I'm going to do a bit of coaching. And you might say, oh, have you tried? And then give them a suggestion, or what about, or could you do it this way? Or have you spoken to so and so? But all of those are suggestive questions where you have an idea or a solution yourself, and you're making suggestions about how they could solve it and what they could do. So you're leading them to your own solution. So that's what I would say is not a good route to go. So that is kind of the trap that a lot of managers fall into, where they are technically asking a question, but again, they're not really powerful. They're not helping develop new thinking in the other person.
Yeah. How do you teach managers to tolerate the discomfort of not being a fixer?
It happens organically over the program and how they learn to make micro changes week after week after week. So it's not like a 1 minute they're going around fixing everything and the next minute they're not. But each week they're learning, and even if they're just reading the book, actually, each chapter, they're learning a little bit more and applying it, and they're given missions to try at work. And when you start seeing the impact of that, you very quickly want to change and continue on the journey. And
Mhm.
we get stories sent to us literally daily, often multiple a day, where people talk about the transformational change they've had and how much happier they are, how much less stressed they are, how now they've forgiven themselves to have all the answers and they can just enjoy asking questions, the difference in their team, how much more engaged they are, how much more innovative they are, how many more solutions they come up with. And of course, one of the things we've been able to do, which is part of the academic study, why that was such a success,
Mhm.
was basically because as we're capturing that data, it comes back to this ROI we were talking about earlier, is as you're capturing those success stories and that data, you're beginning to build a picture of the impact you're actually having now. And you're capturing the amount of money you've saved, or the amount of money you've earned your organization, or the time savings, or 3 people were going to leave the organization, now they're staying, now they've just got promoted. There's so much positivity that stems from this that it immediately makes you thankful that you've made this shift. So we get so many people to say it's been transformational. Their team think they're a better leader. Their team are happier. They're happier because of it. They're more motivated. They're enjoying coming to work. It just changes the dynamics.
Mhm. I'd like to perhaps ask a similar question from a different angle just to make sure we get both data points. What do you say to the high performing manager who equates "I solved it" with "I added value"?
The reality is that high performing manager can't carry on moving up the tree if they're only going to see success from the actual tasks they complete, because that manager has only got, let's say, I say 40 hours, some of us maybe 60 or 80 hours in a week that you can actually work, depends
Uh-huh.
on your mindset. So you're always going to become a blocker. We do, alongside operational coaching, we do exec coaching. Probably the most common challenge we have of people moving from a senior leadership position where they're a senior operator to becoming a C-suite member or a board member is the concept of leading strategically, and having to make that shift from being the person that's got the ideas and driving it to leading an organization. Well, you can't lead an organization by doing everything yourself. You can't scale, you can't grow. And if you've got listeners who are entrepreneurs, this is going to be a hard lesson, but learn it early, because if you haven't got a team around you, you can't scale. You have to be taking yourself out of the equation to scale. So this is no different in individual management teams. I was talking to someone recently and they said the success of a good manager was how the store manager in a retailer was how well their store performed when they're on holiday. And the HR team knew exactly who the good people managers were, because when they went on holiday, their stores outperformed the 2 weeks they're on holiday and on vacation than when they were actually at work, because they'd empowered their team to do well. And the poor managers, when they went on a holiday, everything stopped and the sales went down. And
Uh-huh.
that's quite a nice analogy, a really simple way. If everyone is dependent on you, you are absolutely a bottleneck to success. So it's what you see as your success. If you're serious about wanting to get promotion, if you're serious about wanting to enhance your career or to scale your company, you have to let go of your ego, and you have to understand that you have to be successful through others.
Mhm. Great point. What does the STAR stand for, or what does STAR stand for at the behavioral level, and where do managers get it wrong? Specifically, which step do they skip under pressure?
So the STAR model was designed to embed coaching into sort of managers' behavior by getting to change. So unlike a lot of coaching models like Grow, which is all about the coachee, as we said earlier, the STAR model stops with two steps that are behavioral. So S and T are the behavioral part of the model, and then A and R are the coaching skills, if you like, part of the model. But it's all based around a manager's mindset. So if we go through each step at a time, S is for stop. And this is about stopping and changing state. That is the micro moment when someone comes to you with a problem and asks for your help. It's what you do in that micro moment. It's that split second stopping from telling them and giving them the answer to biting your tongue just for that split second. And then T is for thinking, is this a coachable moment? Can I ask a question? Now you go through S&T once you've embedded that behavioral change. Once you go in seconds, a split second, you'll make that decision. And then once you've made that decision, you then learn how A is for ask and actively listen, how you can really ask powerful questions for the benefit of the other person. But because you are a line manager, you still have to get to a result, and R is for result. So R is actually then helping you get to a point that you've got a micro commitment or a next step that person is going to go away and do, and still come back to you and tell you what's going on, because you're still the manager in that. But it means that no conversation is just a nice chat. Everything's got a benefit and an outcome. So within that, your question was, which one is the hardest?
Hmm.
S is the hardest. I think
I,
if you
I
don't get
guess so.
beyond the stop, if you don't
Yeah.
actually bite your tongue, then you can't get through the model. And most managers often write to us saying, building the state change, the triggers, the work you need to do to make that shift is the hardest bit of work. But once you've done that, the rest becomes much more natural. So that's where
Y-
the work is.
That's unsurprising to me. That's true in my case as well. Now, you've done a lot of research into coaching and can speak about it from a few different angles. So I'd like to ask you, most leadership programs claim impact, but you've subjected yours to academic scrutiny. What do you want to prove or disprove going in?
So actually, academic scrutiny came from the UK government wanting to know if what was out there that could drive UK productivity. So there's a big research call for research projects that could drive UK productivity. And I don't know quite how, but our work had come to the attention of the government, and we got invited to see if Star Manager could be put under scrutiny to see if it would drive UK productivity. And at the time, we thought, yeah, well, we get those sorts of results with our client organizations. Why not? Pretty naive, I would have to say, if anyone's going to go into something like this. So anyway, we put a research project forward. We collaborated with the London School of Economics, and there were 189 research papers put in, and they chose 6. And ours was the only one that was anything to do with management capability. The rest were about technical skills, or they were about machinery and other sort of ways to drive productivity. So the way this works is a randomized control study, which means it's a blind study. We couldn't influence it at all. The London School of Economics randomly selected, based on criteria the government had set, 62 organisations across 14 sectors. And we had a control group and a group of organisations that were going through the programme. And then we had the data collection, obviously, by the LSE at the beginning, normal data through the middle, and then data collection at the end. Now, the beginning and the end was because the control group obviously weren't going through the program, so we wouldn't be naturally capturing their data. So we had to get the level set from the control group as well. So what happened with this is, whether if the program had been unsuccessful and the research had not proved what we were hoping it's going to prove, we would have still had that published, which we didn't realize at the time, which would have collapsed 15 years of business at the time, 20 years of business, and we'd have lost our company. That was where we were naive. I don't think we realized that, because it hadn't crossed our mind it wouldn't be successful until we were quite a long way into the
That's
project.
incredible.
And then we suddenly realized what we subject ourselves to, partly because it also coincided with something called a pandemic, which isn't within our gift or our control. So even with a pandemic going on through part of this project, we still were able to, LSE were able to evidence very, very clearly that our work drove productivity. And there were significant measures around that. So there was things like a 20% increase in management capability. There was a 6-time improvement in retention. The organizations that were on the program had a faster growth trajectory. And there was a 74 times ROI per manager on the program, 74 times, which was fantastic. And all of this was like, couldn't be believed by the government. They said, this is crazy. These numbers are too good to be true. And they said, we want you to relook at it. We want you to take the big companies out, take the small companies out, take the new businesses out, take the established businesses out, take the senior managers out, take the junior managers out, like cut it. There must be some anomalies in here. So they went away for 3 months and recut the data. There were 43 data points in this study. They recut the data from every angle, and they came back to the government and said, no, it's definitely robust. This is absolutely the results. So the government said it's not possible, and they gave it to their statisticians, junior statisticians in the government, and got them to do the same job. 3 months later, they came back and said, this is really, really robust data. So at the end of that, we were able to publish the academic study. Which is, I found out, Dominic said, it's in the top 3 academic studies ever downloaded and read on management in the world at the moment. So that's really exciting. So we put that out in the world to make it more accessible. And then, of course, the answer is a question. The book was our way of having a more accessible way of sharing some of this knowledge, putting the model out there, giving people the opportunity who maybe couldn't afford to go through the program to still access some of the skills and the mini missions and some of the opportunities that, in terms of helping people think about that shift through the book. So that's the work we've been doing actually since the study. But it's it was a moment when I realized we might have just crashed our company. But as it happened, obviously the results were fantastic. So very lucky.
It's probably difficult to say unbiasedly now, but knowing that, had you known that that was at stake, would you have participated in the study?
It's a great question, actually, David. I don't know. We genuinely believed. We'd never had, at the point we did that, we'd never had a company not get benefit from it. And we wouldn't have known we were going to face a pandemic. Right? It never happened in my lifetime before. So I don't think we could have predicted that. But the fact that we still got the results in spite of that, I think, was what I was particularly relieved about. So I probably would have been confident enough to have done it anyway, because I wouldn't have known about a pandemic. If you ask me now, knowing that that could happen again, I think I said, well, I've done it once. So that's fine. But we have so, but I guess the difference now is we always do case studies for all of our larger clients anyway.
Mm,
And the results we got in that academic study were great, but we've constantly developed how we're capturing data, how we're working, how we're launching, how we're setting programs up for success. And when we look at the results, we're going to into an event next week, and we put 3 case studies together, and all of them are getting crazy levels of success, way exceeding. So I think in the study, the percentage of coaching that increased was 70% increase in managers spending time coaching.
mhm,
These 3 organizations that I'm taking are just normal. These are not outliers. It's over 100% in all of them now, the percentage of time managers spending coaching as an increase. So the numbers are going up, not down. They've all
yeah,
achieved over $13 million of capture success already, these 3 organizations.
mhm,
Very different. One's a university, one's an airline, a very well-known airline, and one is a big retailer. They're all getting almost identical kind of outcomes from
wow,
this. So it's very much,
Industry agnostic.
yeah, it is industry agnostic, it's level agnostic, but also it's a universal skill set. So one of the things that London School of Economics identified is operational coaching as a style of management is an absolute universal skill set that works for everyone.
Incredible. One thing that surprised me in my own research, such as it is in your company, was how many organizations were paying for coaching and not using it. Uh, Man, it either come down to fit or being busy, like you said, but people were buying seats and not using them. And that really surprised me. I assumed at the outset that they were using most of the coaching that they paid for. So when you talk about a 70% increase in coaching time, that's massive. And the 74x ROI is definitely attention grabbing. What would you say are the main value drivers behind that number in a typical organization?
So when people are going through the program, they capture real examples of how they're using it. So that ROI isn't even a long tail ROI. It's just in the sort of the 6-month period they might be going through the program, because that's the only time we have access to the data. So the sorts of things they identify is kind of in different categories. It might be a cost saving that they've identified because a project has got through a faster rate, or they've asked better questions that have created a supplier to come back with new deals or improved processes. So it's either cost savings often, it could be revenue generation type capture. We have engagement, retention engagement type capture. We have capture around productivity improvements, process improvements. So it's very tangible. And often they come with very specific examples of what they did differently, the impact of that. And I would say that probably only 3 or 4% of the measures and the examples we collect even put a commercial value. So there's, when we say that 74 times, that came from the 3 or 4% of the captured value that was mentioned, because most managers and leaders will just write back, oh, I had this great conversation and the person went away and was motivated and did this, and they didn't leave the organization. They don't sit there and think, they didn't leave the organization, right, so I'd have had to recruit someone else, that would have to be my time, I'd have had to train someone else, I'd have a headhunter to pay for. Some people don't even think like that. They don't think about the built up costs of that benefit. So many people would tell us the solution or the success without the commercial element. So that 74 times is just the icing on the cake. It's not the whole story.
mhm,
Definitely, yeah. Retention for high performing employees, and like you mentioned, the cost of hiring a new one. There's also the tacit knowledge that goes out the door as well. It's very difficult to replace someone, even if you
Absolutely.
have standard operating procedures. Um,
Yeah.
why do most management development efforts move at a glacial pace? And what's your counter move?
Yes, frustrating, isn't it? What I find it traditional traditional training. I still find it just crazy how long it takes. Our world is moving so quickly. Kind of, we're missing the point if we're not able to be a bit more agile in how we're doing it. Our counter move, as you ask, is to scale and scale fast in the ideal world. The bold organizations that are really getting behind operational coaching are having transformational experiences. We have got a university in the UK, Warwick University. It's one of the top 70 universities in the world, who made a decision as part of their sort of their 2030 people strategy that they wanted to completely transform the capability of all managers right across the organization. They made the decision to put all 2,500 line managers and academics and professional service staff all through the program over the 5 years. The idea is that there'll be a wave of change over that period of time, and then there'll be no more accidental managers. There'll be more line manager lottery. That will all be a distinct, end to
Mhm.
that. Everyone will have the privilege of coming to work and being supported and developed by a star manager. That is really, really exciting. We've got a retailer who's just gone live recently, who we had the CEO create a video at the beginning of the program to actually state how this links to their core strategy as an organization, why it's fundamental, and why they want every store manager to become certified store managers, because it's absolutely fundamental to their values and their ethos. These sorts of things is how you get speed of change, is when you've really got that stakeholder support and that organizational strategy that's linking to it and driving it through. The reason most things move at a slow pace is because you don't have that real link to organizational objectives and that stakeholder buy-in.
What has to be true inside learning and development for this to land without becoming another program in air quotes?
Well, I think it's some of the things we just talked about. So if something is going to land and not be another program, it has to be, a lot of the work we do is more around transformation than another
Mhm.
program. I mean, you could have it as another program, and that every time you promote a line manager to even promote someone to become a line manager, they get this as basic training. That could just be part of your modus operatum, and that would just be a program. But it does mean that at least every time you promote someone, they know how to manage people, and they're a good manager. So that's kind of the worst case scenario, I guess. The best case scenario is if you're serious about transforming all your management capability and transforming the culture of the organization, and then it becomes a transformation program. And when you run transformation programs, you have a very different setup than if you're just doing a bit of training. And I think that
Mhm.
that's the shift. Is this a management training opportunity? Tick, that's fine. That is just a training
Mhm.
program, but that's fine. It's a very good one. It's got behavioral change. It's got ROI. It's going to
Mhm.
have an absolute long tail with a fantastic results. Or are you actually wanting to transform the culture and the capability right across your organization, drive innovation, drive productivity, drive collaboration, drive performance, and then it would be set up for success as a transformation program.
When you roll this out organization wide, what is the failure mode you see most often in the first 30 days?
Yeah, so I don't like the idea of failure mode, because I don't we don't typically see that part. We have, the only times we've seen a failure mode, if I'm honest, is when it's been completely misused as an intervention by an organization. So I'll give you an example where we were asked to launch the event to a group of failing managers, and this was their last chance saloon. And they were basically told that if they didn't do this, they were kind of going to, that's it. They're like bottom of the list, they're bottom of the pile. The company was fed up with them. That's no way to launch a program to engage leaders. So that is the only, I'd say, failure, which is an awful setup. And that tells you everything you need to know. If you set up a program for failure, it's going to fail. So the question really is, how do you set up a program for success? What would have to be in place to have a really guaranteed a successful program? And you're right about the first 30 days. We also recognize that's on a change program like this, that's pivotal to get that momentum. So there's a few things we do pre-launch that's absolutely critical. So I've already mentioned a few of them actually. So one of the things that you need to do is have a really correct North Star. So why are we doing this in the first place, and how does that align to the organizational initiatives, the strategy? We talked about the people strategy for Warwick University, the airline we work with, Virgin Atlantic. They have an absolute clear mission about wanting to become the most loved airline. To achieve that, they need great people, and they need great people leaders. So they have an absolute clarity of how this sits into their absolute organizational initiative. Then you need the right stakeholder support. So who's going to be the person that's going to be the voice or the face inside the organization saying this is important, this is why we're doing it, and I'm putting my name to this. And again,
Mm.
having someone that really is passionate and cares about this and thinks it's a good thing and is vocal about that is brilliant. So I mentioned the CEO of a retailer who actually created a video as part of the launch sequence. Then you need a positive communication strategy. So how are you setting up this? What are you saying to people before they come on it? How are you setting this up inside the organization? Is it just another training program, or is it something more important than that? So that retailer had a big launch event of some of their initiatives, and they had Star Manager at the center of that. So every store manager right across the whole portfolio of stores and all of their business was in a room to hear about why they're going to be invited over the next year to join this program. So it was really well communicated. And the next thing they did, which is another thing that's really important, is how you recruit those first the cohorts. So you talked about, before we went live on this program, about the people that just have to believe in it
Uh,
and those that then need to see the proof.
mm.
And then you've obviously got the third group, which we didn't talk about, which are the people that kind of follow on at the end because everyone else is doing it now. So the late adopters. So we need to make sure that the people in that first wave are going to be great champions, going to be great advocates when they go through. So really recruiting to have the best participants at the front end, just people who are going to be excited about it and be bought in, but also believe that they're going to help lead the change wave for the rest of the organization, be proud to be part of that, makes for great first wave. And that's important. And then the third thing is having a really great learner experience in that first 30 days so that they really are excited about it. And we've got a few things embedded into the program. I call it our triple lock approach, where there are 3 points of contact that we do at the beginning to almost push them away and say, you know, you need to do this proactively to be in the program. And they come to a kind of a live launch before they start the program. And we say that if you're not into this, tell us now, say no, and we'll ditch you off of it. And then when they start the program, in order to get this really lovely learner pack, we send out with a book and some question cards and some resources, which is kind of embedding materials to have around them, like environmental triggers. They have to actually put that address in and lock that shipment. So there's 3 opportunities for them to leave and not do it. But if they
Mm.
do those 3, then they're pushed really hard in that first 30 days to really encourage through. And it's a bit like a rocket launch. If you put lots of energy at the front end and you get the rocket launched, then you only need to do little nudges
Mm.
to keep it in orbit. So we have really lots of energy in that first 30 days.
Yeah.
Then we're supporting and nudging them throughout the rest of the period. And then they have a successful landing where they get their certification. So that's how we set it up for success. And we've learned so much over the years about what works, what doesn't work, that we have a
Mhm.
heat map. So we know
Mm.
what's red, amber, and green. So when clients
Mhm.
say, can we do this? We'll go, well, you can, but that's probably going to be red on our map and that's not going to help you. But if we do
Mm.
it this way, we might get to amber or green and make it more successful.
Mhm. What's your favorite example of a manager changing one micro behavior and seeing a measurable lift?
Well, this is probably a story that Dominic would have told because it's very, very personal to him. But there's a really brilliant story of a very, very senior leader who was right at the end of his career in a major company. It's a big hospitality company in the UK. And he was very proud of his achievements. He's always been a solver and a fixer, and he'd had a fantastic career. And he had a very bright team member who had wanted to come up with a business case to make some changes. And he'd just told her that he tried it lots of times and it was absolutely, he'd done it before and this would happen, this would happen, and this would happen, and it wouldn't work. And it's a lovely idea. And he's had the idea himself, but honestly, no, let's just stick with what we're doing. He then came and kind of had this epiphany on the program that he'd actually not let her develop her ideas. So he decided to go back and let her develop these business cases. So he said, okay, I'm going to give you 2 weeks. You've got this idea, go and develop your business cases and let's see what it is. So he asked her some questions about how she might do that, what her ideas, how she want to prioritize it. He kind of supported her to do some thinking and then he sent her away. She came back and presented these absolutely fantastic ideas. He was so blown away. He realized in that moment that his decision to be a problem solver his whole career had
Mhm.
completely prevented this individual from developing for 3 years. This person had worked for him for 3 years. She was an extremely bright graduate. And he realized in that moment she'd had no development for 3 years. He'd not let her evolve and create these, and her ideas were better than anything he'd ever seen or thought of before. And that was his pivotal moment. After that, he decided he was absolutely going to embrace a coaching style of leadership. His last few years in business were absolutely about developing the talent around him. It was an epiphany for him.
Mhm.
And stories like that, with someone so dyed in the wool, so set in their ways, who can still see the power of changing even that late in their career. And the number of people that write to us and say, this was the best thing I've ever done. If only I'd done it earlier. Why didn't I have this at the start? Is kind of that constant message that we get.
Could you give our listeners a 3 questions starter kit they can use for their next 10-minute problem solving conversation?
Oh, yeah, the answer is I can. It's kind of, I guess I point of powerful questions is learning how to make them really authentic, and to be how you speak, and really learning very spontaneously to ask questions rather than to kind of learn, here's the 7 questions you can ask. And there are books that go down that route. So I will share, because the reason I'll share, we have something called a powerful question card deck. And so we try and give people some sort of starter questions to help them. So in the interest of answering your question, I will do that. But can I just caveat that the point of this is to really learn how to naturally bring questions into your flow of work, not to necessarily learn them.
Understood.
But obviously, so to take this not too literally, when we teach how the art of asking powerful questions, and it's in the book. So there's something called question that was developed to help you think about different contexts within how you ask questions. So what is the time frame that you're asking? Are you asking a question to get them to think about the past or the present, or to get them to future think? Are you asking them a scoping question? Are you asking them a question to help them change perspective or shift perspective? So there's different types of questions you can ask depending on what outcome you want to help the other person achieve. So let me give you an example of a change context question. So if I kind of look at the cards, so imagine this had been achieved already. Looking back, what is it that had to change? So if you've got someone that's really stuck, then getting them to kind of change the context of how they're viewing the problem is one of the things you can do.
Mhm.
Another one is to shift perspective, to get them to shift the way they're looking at a problem. So what advice would you give to a colleague in your situation? So if someone had come to you for that advice, how might you have approached it? Which gets them to start unlocking some of that early thinking that they might have done.
Mhm.
Often we don't do something because we've got a barrier we need to overcome. How you challenge the barrier can be quite important. So this one is, what is it that makes you think that? So many people don't do things, or
Right.
because they think they can't, right? They think they're not allowed to, they haven't got permission. And this
Mhm.
comes back to what I was saying right at the beginning about sometimes people are just seeking permission when they're coming to you with a problem. And they might say, well, I didn't think I was allowed to. And then you can unpick the fact that they've got these artificial barriers that are preventing them from doing it, or they're not the right level, or they don't have the right experience. They go and speak to that person directly. It's often just these artificial barriers, and we can crash those barriers really quickly. And then this is the one that my husband taught me to ask. I call it the marriage saver or relation saver
Let's hear it.
question. Okay, ready for this? Anyone
Yep.
with problems? What does my partner need from me right now?
Mm.
So next time you go home
Smart.
and you're talking to your girlfriend or boyfriend or someone you love, and they're sharing a problem, they probably don't want you to solve it.
Mm.
So you need to ask the question, what does my partner want from me right now? And think instead, is it they want you
Mhm.
to listen to them? That's a more of a reflective question for yourself, but
Mhm.
really think about why they're coming to you with that issue. What do they really need? So that's another one. You can use that at work as well. Obviously, it doesn't just have to be for marriage or for relationships,
Sure.
but it is a
Well,
good
that
one.
that meta narrative. So I have two questions to conclude with on my side. What should managers say when they genuinely do not know the answer, and the team expects them to?
Well, hopefully, quite quickly, when you read the book or you do the program, you're going to learn that the brilliant managers never have the answers. What they have is great questions instead. So, a great thing to do in that situation is to say, what question could I ask you now that would be really helpful? So, actually lean into the fact that you're not going to be, and unless you're going to sit there with Gemini and ChatGPT, in your brain. and,
One second.
if I get my Google glasses and
Yeah,
and just excuse me while I just chat
right.
to my AI brain. I mean,
Don't
in a
pay
few
any
years'
attention to
time.
the man behind the curtain.
Honestly, in a few years we'll have that, I'm sure, that device there, and we can all
Mm,
do that. But
yeah.
yes, that's still not us, right? That's a machine. So that aside, and actually joking about that, the reality is it's a good thing. It's healthy, actually. Starting, but I don't have all the answers. So let's learn, understand what everyone around the table thinks. The best, we did loads of research years ago. I interviewed a major consultancy. I was interviewing a lot of these senior leaders there to try and figure out what in that culture they believed good leadership was, and who
Mhm,
were the best leaders in the organization. And everyone kept mentioning one person, and it was really bizarre. And when I actually got down to the bottom of why this person was everyone's favorite leader, this is an organization with probably about 100,000 employees, but they all had this one person in their head at the senior level. This person asked questions. When he was in meetings with these colleagues, he made them feel heard, listened to, important. And he was the best leader because he asked questions and listened. So they felt they'd had these great meetings because they were contributing, they were involved. I
mhm,
think this leader said very little.
mhm,
So actually, if you're going to your team and you don't know the answers, that's a celebration. We should be celebrating that. And we should be collaborating as a team to solve this
mhm,
problem together.
mhm. Going back to your earlier point about a manager or leader's role being to empower the whole rather than be the source of that achievement or accomplishment, because then you become the bottleneck and you're also limited in your capacity for problem solving and perspective. That makes a
Absolutely.
lot of sense, and I resonate with my own kind of growth and discovery. It kind of maybe is a double side of the coin to the Dunning Kruger effect, where I achieve the most when I feel like I haven't really been that big of a part of it. And so it's interesting and humbling to go through that. How do you each complement your model? Because it seems like you mentioned you come from retail. So what what's maybe a way in which Dominic maybe disagreed with the way that you approached the problem, and then what came around and saw the value? Do you kind of how did you sharpen one another?
Yeah, it's really good. Anyone who's working with family members in running a business, I think, will recognize that that can be really, really challenging and also really positive. Um, we have managed to have, I don't know how many marriages. We've worked together for 26 years and been married about the same amount of time, I think a year longer. So, how we have survived that, we say we've had about 3 marriages between us in this journey. And I'm not going to lie, it can be challenging. We call it creative tension. We always recognize that we can have very robust conversations. We often disagree and have very different perspectives on things, but the debate creates a better outcome. And we're very respectful that we both have quite a lot of different insights to bring to the party. And we both have the one thing in common is great passion for getting the best result. And
Mhm,
because we've got that one common goal of wanting the best for the organization and for our
mhm,
colleagues that we work with, that we absolutely get to a compromise, which is always better and always a better outcome than either of our individual ideas start with. What we have had to do as the team's grown and we become a bigger organization is learn to mediate that. So it's a much more professional environment. In the early days, 26 years ago, it was a little bit more robust, the creative
mm,
tension, and now it's much more professional.
sure.
So that's come with time and experience and feedback actually from
Mhm,
our team as it grew.
that's brilliant. Where can people get in touch with you? Is there anything you wanna leave us with in terms of, like, what you do or learning and development or, management, et cetera? It's just, giving the floor to you before we close out.
Well, I think it's been really, really great talking to you today. But I think for us, we're on an absolute mission to unleash the potential of everyone. And I know that sounds really corny, but it actually is stacked against our vision and our mission. So we really believe that most people right now come to work every day and they're in a line manager lottery. And they're in a line manager lottery because 82% of us are accidental managers. And that's not our fault, right? We just were very good and we got promoted and became a manager of people. But that isn't why we we're promoted in the first place. It's because we're good at something else. So I think what I'd really love, if anyone listening believes they are an accidental manager and they have any interest in changing that at all, and even just a curiosity to change it, then as a starting point, read the book. The Answer is a Question. It's available from Amazon and all good retailers, Hudson News, Barnes and Noble, wherever you're based, you should be able to get hold of it. And it's a really easy read. It's not a heavy book. It has got some of the data from the academic study in it. We've got loads of case studies, lots of stories. It's got a lot of the content in it. So it's a good read, and it comes as an audiobook. So that's step one. If you are more interested in taking it further, obviously we'd love to chat to you. Do get in touch. We've put a special webpage together for your listeners. It's called starmanager.global. So it's on our main Star Manager website, starmanager.global/podcast. And if your listeners go there, we've got extra resources. If they let us know whether they're looking for themselves or for their organization, we've got a wealth of free resources that they can access and kind of start learning a little bit more about how to upskill themselves or their line managers. So that's really the main thing. And if you've enjoyed the chat, feel free to connect on LinkedIn. My name is unique on LinkedIn, amazingly. So if you search for Laura Ashley Timms, you'll be able to link in with me, or follow our company Notion Star on LinkedIn. And that's really, everything.
Well, thank you for talking to us today. It's really, really interesting, and your research is impressive. And I like the story of accidentally going all in on the study with the government and winding up successful and exceeding people's expectations. So please keep it up, and thank you for the conversation today.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. Thanks, David. Really appreciate it.